Hey everybody, welcome back to a new video. Today we are looking at a brand new product from EcoFlow. This is the EcoFlow Delta 2. Now this is quite an upgrade over the previous generation, starting with the actual batteries inside. This has lithium iron phosphate or LFP batteries now, and it's rated at a full 3,000 charge cycles to 80% of the original capacity. So very cool that EcoFlow has gone this direction on their smaller power stations. Now some people claim that when you go to lithium iron phosphate batteries, you lose all portability because they weigh so much more. So looking at one of the competitors to this product here, the brand new Jackery Pro 1000, it has lithium NMC batteries that are rated at 1,000 charge cycles to 80%, and that power station weighs 25 pounds. Well, this one coming in with a very similar capacity of 1,024 watt hours with LFP batteries only weighs 27 pounds. So for 2 pounds more, you get 3 times the charge cycles and a much safer battery chemistry. Now another huge benefit to this power station over competitors is this has a large 1800 watt pure sine wave inverter, meaning you can power almost all the appliances in your house off this one power station. Not only does this have a large inverter, but it also has EPS backup mode, meaning that when the power goes out, it will swap over automatically to the backup batteries, acting like an uninterrupted power supply. So you have a large inverter with UPS backup mode. What else could you ask for? Now, one other feature that would be pretty cool is if you could double the capacity of the power station by adding an expansion battery. Well, EcoFlow thought of that, guys. They have an expansion port on the side of the power station where you can plug in an additional expansion battery. Now, this one here is their 1,000 watt hour lithium iron phosphate battery that is matched with this one, so you can get 2,000 watt hours, or you can even plug in a previous Delta Max battery, the 2,000 watt hour version, and get 3,000 watt hours total. So this is kind of a jack of all trades. It's a small, lightweight, portable power station perfect for camping or portable needs, yet it has a large inverter and expansion batteries, so it can also fulfill the role of a home battery backup. So very cool that this is kind of useful in many different scenarios. Now the EcoFlow Delta 2 will be available for order today. You can pick up the power station for $999, and you can pick up an expansion battery for $799. Now I do have a 5% off discount code that I'll include down in the video description and in a pinned comment. So after watching the video, and if you like the performance, you guys can save $50 by using that discount code. Now before we jump into the rest of the video, I want to let you guys know that EcoFlow did send this power station out for review. I'm not getting paid to make this video, but my video is in exchange for this product. And if you guys have seen any of my previous power station review videos, I always try to be as unbiased as possible. I give you guys a good list of pros and cons, and I test the power stations extensively to see how they actually perform, and then we can compare that to the competition. So at the end of the video, I'll be giving you guys a pros and cons about this power station, and you guys are gonna see the real world performance as we move forward in the video. So let's go ahead and talk about the testing I did on the AC inverter and the actual results I was able to get. Now I've turned the power station around so you guys can see the back where you plug in your appliances. Now taking a closer look, there are 6 AC outlets and 2 of them are full 20 amp receptacles. Now the AC inverter on this power station is rated at 1,800 watts continuous or 2,700 watts peak. Now one of the best ways to test that out is by plugging in a full 1,800 watt load and letting it run for 15 minutes. So I plugged in 1,800 watts, started my timer, and I let the test run. Now during this, I like to plug in my oscilloscope to see what type of power we get out. Now when I plugged in the oscilloscope, I was getting a pure sine wave output, and I was also seeing a full 120 volts. So that you get very good power output from this power station, even under max load. Now during this max load test, I noticed that the fans were pretty loud on the power station, so I pulled out my decibel meter, and this is what it sounded like. Now I did let this run for 15 minutes, and it was able to pass this test without any issues. Now another important aspect of testing the AC inverter is to see if it can handle surge current. So I took this outside and plugged in some of my larger power tools. The first one was a 10-inch sliding compound miter saw. This is the biggest saw that I have, and some power stations have struggled to turn this on. And when I plugged this one in and tried turning it on, the saw ran just fine. I also wanted to test this on my portable air compressor, so I plugged that in and it also started up the air compressor without any issues. So this power station does handle surge loads very well. Now another feature of the AC inverter that I wanted to test was the ability to act as an uninterrupted power supply. Now in the owner's manual, this is called EPS mode, or emergency power supply mode. So it's pretty cool that this will be plugged into your wall and it passes power straight through to your appliances, but right when it senses a power outage or it's unplugged from the wall, it swaps the load over to the batteries inside. Now the manual does state that this has a 30 millisecond switchover time, so let's go ahead and see how this performed. Now I plugged in my studio lights, I plugged in a desktop computer and a portable monitor. Now when I unplugged it, you could see that the lights flickered, swapping over to the battery backup, and my portable monitor shut off, but you can actually see as I turned it back on, the desktop was still running. Now I did test this 3 individual times. One time the portable monitor stayed on and 2 times it stayed off, but the desktop stayed powered up each time. So very good that this has a backup UPS mode, and it did work really well with sensitive electronics. Now, of course, we wanted to see if the AC inverter put out any interference or any noise, so I plugged in my guitar amp to the AC inverter, and this is what it sounded like when the guitar amp was running. So as you can see, it puts out very clean power. I didn't hear any crackling or any loud noises. So if you wanted to rock out with your rock band using this as a power supply, you should be good. Now the few final tests that I wanted to do have to deal with the actual capacity and power usage of this inverter in an idle state. Now the first test was a full capacity test, so I charged this up to 100% and I discharged it at a 0.2 C rate with a watt meter in line coming off the AC inverter. Now this has an advertised capacity of 1024 watt hours, and as I discharged it down, I was able to get 850 watt hours of capacity when it hit 0%. So I was able to get around 83% of the advertised capacity, and I'm pretty sure that has to do with the large inverter and small battery combo. So I wanted to test adding an expansion battery to see if that ratio would get any better. So I charged up the power station and the expansion battery and discharged it again at a 0.2 C rate. Now this time it had an advertised capacity of 2048 watt hours, and I was able to get 1780 watt hours, or 86% of the advertised capacity. So as you add on an expansion battery, you do get more capacity, hitting that 85% goal. Now the final test that I like to do is just to see how much power the AC inverter uses while it's sitting idle. So I charged this up to 100% and let it sit with the AC inverter enabled for 10 hours. I came back after 10 hours and the power station was sitting at 92%, meaning that the AC inverter used 8% over that 10-hour period. Now, most power stations use around 2% to 1% per hour, and this one used around 0.8% per hour, so very good results there. Now, overall, looking at the performance of this inverter, it puts out very similar power to your power company. We were able to pull a total of 1800 watts for 15 minutes, no issues there, and we didn't see any noise, and EPS mode worked just fine. So thumbs up to EcoFlow for the high quality inverter in this power station. Now in the next section of the video, I want to talk about the DC output on this power station. Now looking at the bottom here, you have a 12 volt cigarette plug with a dust cover, and then you have two 5521 barrel connections that are rated at 3 amps. Now as I plugged in my battery load tester, these were each regulated at 12.7 volts, which is really good, and that stayed the same throughout the entire state of charge of this battery. Now I wanted to see the maximum power that you could get through each of these. So I plugged in my battery load tester and I was able to get a total of 130 watts out of the 12 volt cigarette plug, and plugging that into the 5521 connection, I was also able to get a total of 130 watts. Now I wanted to plug in 2 battery load testers to see what the maximum power output was for this circuitry, and the maximum power I could get was 130 watts or so, maybe a little bit higher before it would shut off. So it looks like this is rated for around 10 amps total, and so you can actually pull 10 amps from the 5521 connections. However, I don't really recommend doing that because those connections will get fairly warm. If you want to pull 10 amps, try to pull it through the 12 volt cigarette plug. Now, of course, I wanted to test the actual capacity and idle power usage for this power station, so I charged it up to 100%, plugged in my battery load tester, and discharged it at around 10 amps, and after that test was done, I was able to pull 870 watt hours. Now doing the math, that's actually 85% of the advertised capacity, so we were able to get 85% of the actual capacity through the DC output. Now I wanted to test to see what we get with an expansion battery, so I charged up the power station, plugged in the expansion battery that was all the way charged up, and I discharged it again at the 10 amp level. And after that test was done, I was able to get 1,627 watt hours, which was right around 79% of the advertised capacity. Now that's pretty normal. Usually what happens is you have these 48 volt batteries, you do have some conversion losses from 48 volts down to 12 volts. And so we did see a little bit less power efficiency as we had two of these batteries with the DC output. Now I also wanted to test the DC power drain. So leaving the DC output, having this charged up to 100%, how much power would we lose over a given amount of time with the DC output enabled? So I left the DC output on for 10 hours and I was stunned to come back. It was still at 100%. So they must be doing some sort of smart power loading here to leave the DC output on and still get 100% after 10 hours. So very impressive DC output. Basically, that means that as you have the DC output enabled, you don't see very much power loss at all. Now, another really good test on this is to see how long this will power a 12 volt compressor fridge. This is a perfect power station for camping because it's so portable and lightweight. And I tested to see how long I could run that. And that was just on this battery itself, not the expansion battery. So I came back after 79 hours and the fridge was still running off the power station. Now it was down to around 1% of power or 2% power left. So you can get around 79 hours of runtime off a single charge. Now that was at 75 degrees ambient. So of course your results will vary based on humidity and ambient temperature and stuff like that. And if you added an additional expansion battery to this, you'd be able to get a very, very long runtime with your DC powered fridge. So very impressive results. This is probably going to be my go-to camping setup from here on out just because I've been very impressed with the DC output and what it can do. Now in the front of this power station there are plenty of USB ports to charge your mobile devices. For example, you have two 100 watt USB-C power delivery ports, you have two USB-A quick charge ports, and two standard USB-A ports. Now, of course, I wanted to test all this out, so I plugged in a ton of different devices. I had a laptop plugged into one of the USB-C ports. I had a power station charging at 100 watts plugged into the other USB-C port, and various devices plugged into the other ports. I was pulling over 200 watts out of the front of this power station using just the USB ports. Let's go ahead and talk about charging the EcoFlow Delta 2. Now, on the back of the power station, you have a flap that lifts up that shows you two charging ports. You have an AC charging port and you have a DC charging port. Now this comes with two different cables. It comes with an AC charging cable and it also comes with a DC charging cable that you can plug into a 12 volt cigarette plug. Now unfortunately, EcoFlow does not include the solar charging adapter for this power station, the MC4 to XT60 adapter. You can purchase it on their website for around $25 or you can purchase one on Amazon for a little bit cheaper. Now this has the same features as the previous generation, the EcoFlow Extreme Charging, and EcoFlow was basically the company that started all the internal charging. Very impressive charging speeds on all EcoFlow products. This one has the ability to charge at up to 1200 watts off of AC wall power. Now that is a very fast charging speed for this power station, and you do kind of have the downside of having the fans run like little turbos while it's charging that fast. For example, this is what it sounds like when it's charging at that 1200 watt level. Now, what's good is you have the ability to be able to turn the charging speed down in the Smart app. So once you connect to the power station using either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi using EcoFlow's app, you can turn down the charging speed, and I noticed the fan noise significantly drops below 600 watts. So you have the ability to charge it up fast if you need to, but it does have quite a bit of noise. But if you charge it around 600 watts, you can still charge it fairly quickly and not have that same level of noise. Now let's go ahead and talk about charging this power station off DC input sources. Now you look at the port here, it supports 11 all the way up to 60 volts DC. So you have a bunch of different options that you can use to charge this up. For example, if you wanted to plug this into your vehicle 12 volt socket in your car, truck, or RV, you'd get around 95 to 100 watts charging input because this senses that and limits it to 8 amps so that you don't blow fuse in your vehicle. Now you also have the ability to plug in solar panels. I did test plugging in EcoFlow's 220 watt bifacial solar panel. Now the testing conditions were horrible for this panel. It was over 100 degrees. I had a ton of wildfire smoke in the air, and I was still getting 197 watts from that solar panel. So I'll definitely do a follow-up video on that solar panel because I think we can get very, very good power with that. So you can connect up any 12 volt solar panel by itself and it will still charge, and you have the ability to connect up multiple panels in series, as long as you don't go over the open circuit voltage of 60 volts. So check the back of your solar panels and make sure that they don't go over that limit. Now, when you connect solar panels in series, it adds up the voltage, and I have 3 perfect panels for this power station. Now, I set out 3 of my new Power 210 watt solar panels. These have an open circuit voltage of 19.5 volts. So when I put them together in series, it's just under 60 volts here. And I was able to max out the solar charging input on this power station at 500 watts using those 3 panels in series. Now, if you connected any random 3 solar panels in series, you would go over the 60 volts. So you have to be very careful with that. This will most likely support most solar panels connected together in series and just 2 panels together. But if you wanted to go out and look for the perfect panel, those new Power 210s are very ideal for the 60 volt cutoff limit for this power station. So very impressive charging results off DC input and solar panels. Now you also have the ability to charge this off of external batteries. You could hook up a 24 volt battery or a 48 volt battery, as long as that voltage never went over 60 volts, and you could dump power from those batteries into this. So this power station has a lot of flexibility with charging off DC power. Now the last thing I like to test with charging on a power station is if it can support pass-through charging, or the ability to use it and charge the power station at the same time. So I plugged in multiple loads and had this charging off the AC wall outlet, and I was able to support pass-through charging for over 30 minutes without any issues. So yes, this power station does support pass-through charging. Well, now that I've completed the testing on the DC output, the AC inverter, and kind of done some charging demos, I usually like to talk about build quality, the actual display, and smart app connectivity. Now, EcoFlow does have a smart app that you can connect to this either through Bluetooth or Wi-Fi, which is really cool. You can change a ton of different settings. You can update the firmware, change the charging speed, change when the display turns on and off. I mean, there's so many different options. One really cool feature about that smart app is that you can actually reach out to customer support through the smart app, and they already have your serial information, all that type of stuff when you register the product. So very cool that you can get customer service just through the smart app. Now, I have used that in the past with EcoFlow. I had my EcoFlow River Pro that broke, and I actually got it replaced just by using the smart app customer support feature. So huge thumbs up to EcoFlow customer support. This product does have a 5-year warranty, and that is huge for the market of power stations. So very impressive here. Now, as for the actual display, you have your watts input, you have your watts output, you have an actual battery percentage, and it gives you an estimated time remaining, either if you're charging or discharging the battery. So pretty cool there. Now, as for build quality on EcoFlow products, you always have very good build quality. They're always at the top of the pack. Just very good design, very compact. You have your 2 handles here. Now this comes in at 27 pounds, and if you want to purchase the expansion battery, it comes in at 21 pounds. So both of them together, stacked on top of each other, weighs right around 50 pounds. Now what's interesting is if you have the Delta Max, which was the previous generation to this, it had lithium NMC batteries. It's a 2,000 watt hour device, and it actually comes in at 48 pounds. So this actually weighs the same as that, but as you can see with the videos on the screen, the Delta Max is much more compact. Now, when comparing the power station side by side with the expansion battery, they have similar screens and the main power button, but you can see the expansion battery does not have any USB ports. Now, when comparing the back of the power station to the back of the expansion battery, you can see there are no outputs and there are no ways to charge this other than plugging it into the power station by itself. Now, I feel that EcoFlow missed out on an opportunity here to have some sort of DC output or charging option on the expansion battery itself. Some of the competitors to EcoFlow do have expansion batteries that can charge on their own and have some sort of output, whether it's USB or DC output. Now, when looking at the top of the expansion battery, there's a storage cubby where you can actually keep the extension cable that connects both units together. Now, coming to the end of the video, I always like to sum up the performance on these power stations. I put them through my power station grading system, and I kind of go through some pros and cons and final thoughts of the power stations themselves. So let's go ahead and break it down for the EcoFlow Delta 2. Now, I will have my power station grading system down in the video description if you want to see how all the other power stations have tested. And I've actually made some updates per your guys' request for larger power stations. For example, on any power station over 1,000 watt hours now, I actually removed the USB-C bidirectional requirement and I added UPS mode. Now, I've also made some other adjustments to the pricing per watt hour. So all these changes will be reflected in the power station grading sheet for all the other power stations I've tested in the past. So let's go ahead and jump through these 10 points. This has the ability to score 10 points, and it did fairly well. So let's go ahead and see what score we got. Can this charge up to 100% in less than 4 hours? Yes, it can. Does it support pass-through charging? Yes, it does. It has a pure sine wave inverter. It does have regulated DC output. It has an informational display. There are no auto shut-off settings. It does have UPS functionality. It did meet 85% of the rated capacity, and it did charge within 5 hours using solar panels. Now, the last grading point was the price per watt hour under 80 cents or better. Unfortunately, this comes in at a little above 90 cents per watt hour, so I gave it a half of a point there. So adding up all the points here, it comes out to 9.5 points out of 10 points available, which is one of the best scores that we've ever gotten on a large power station. So very good results here. So I will show the updated results in my power station grading sheet. If you guys are interested, check out the video description down below. Now, I know these videos are super long, guys, but basically we're jumping into the pros and cons and my final thoughts about the EcoFlow Delta 2. Now, in my opinion, it's important if you're going to go spend, $1,000 on a power station or, start investing money into an ecosystem like what EcoFlow has, it's important to know this information. So that's why my reviews are so in-depth. Now, just remember, all this information that I'm presenting to you is so that you guys can make the best decision and decide if this power station is right for you. Now, when looking at the pros and cons of this power station, there are definitely more pros. This scored really well on our power station grading sheet. The main con that comes to my mind is just the fan noise. It seems that this has like 3 levels of fans. It has a quiet mode, a medium mode, and then a turbo mode. And whenever you're discharging it at max speeds or charging it at max speeds, these fans turn on and they are loud. I'd love to see a firmware update in the future to maybe drop the fan speed down a little bit. The reason I say that is because the air coming out has always been cool. It's never been warm air, so I feel like it is moving a ton of air, but maybe even too much. So it might be beneficial to reduce the fan noise and drop down the fan speed. Now, that's just my recommendation. I'm not an engineer. Obviously, they've probably done extensive testing to this, but as a consumer, that's probably what I would like to see, is just maybe a little bit less fan noise here. That's basically the only con that I can think of. Everything else on the power station performed really well. As for pros, this has LFP 3000 charge cycles. You have your smart app connectivity, UPS mode. You have a really nice display, a ton of different settings, no auto shut-off settings. I mean, this thing is basically just the new standard for any 1,000 watt hour power station. It has expandability options. I'm looking forward to seeing products from EcoFlow in the future, because if they are updating their Delta series to have LFP batteries, I can only imagine that they are doing the same with their River series. So very, very exciting news here. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching the video here. If you did like this review video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, I invite you guys to subscribe, because I always focus on unbiased reviews of these products and how they perform in real life scenarios. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you guys in a future video. We'll see you guys later.